So yeah, it's a great pleasure to be asked to present at the SmartNanoTox closing conference, I guess. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the NanoCommons KnowledgeBase, which was mentioned several times already. But really, what I'm going to focus on is how it is supporting SmartNanoTox to make sure it has a lasting legacy from the data and the models. So NanoCommons, how do I make it go forward? Ah, there we go. Okay. So NanoCommons is a research infrastructure project, which means it's slightly different than a standard research project. So it has a strong focus on developing the infrastructure itself, so the tools and the supports and the underpinning activities, and then on building the community and on supporting the community to access the facilities. So in this case, as you can see on the slide at the bottom, that the sorts of things we're working on are all around knowledge management. So designing experimental workflows and implementing them with a data management focus, then providing data processing and analysis tools for data visualization and predictive toxicity or toxicology, and then data storage and online accessibility. And the overarching aims of the project really are then to remove barriers from access to data and to develop this integrated knowledge base to facilitate all of us to use the data and to support things like grouping and read across, to support fair, so findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable data, and then really just to overcome the challenge that our nanosafety projects have had for a while, that the end of the project often means that the data is lost or only partially available. So that's really what the NanoCommons research infrastructure is trying to do. So one of the things we've focused on really is looking at the data lifecycle. So rather than data management being something that you do at the end of the project, we're trying to move that much earlier in the process. So already at the time that you're planning your experiments, you're already thinking about what's the metadata you need to capture about it. Can we set up the SOPs and protocols? As you're acquiring the data, that you're already acquiring it into templates that are ontologically annotated, and again that you're capturing all the appropriate metadata, so the instrument information, the software parameters, and so on. Again, during manipulation, that you're recording all of the steps you do in terms of data cleaning, gap filling, statistical software and all of that, through analysis and storage and your fair sharing. So at this stage, it becomes sort of the responsibility of the database managers. But before that, you'll see that on the outside, we have who is responsible. So the data creators are responsible for a lot of the work in the early stages. And then it can still be the creators, but it might also go into, you might pass the data on to others to do some analysis. And curators start to come in here as well, who are the ones that are doing this ontological annotation. And just a quick word on what metadata is. It is data about the data, and there's different types. So we're quite used to bibliographic metadata, so about a publication. But also we have the technical metadata and the descriptive metadata, which really describes the experiments. And all of those are important to capture to facilitate this reuse of data. So for newer projects, we always suggest starting here. But because we came in and got involved with SmartNanoTox later on, we're sort of working in this area and moving the data along. And we have, in the same special issue that nanomaterials that Vladimir already mentioned for the AOP roadmap, we have a paper about to be submitted on the metadata and the metadata requirements. So I'm not going to spend any time on this really, other than just to say a key piece of what we're doing is this idea of the electronic lab notebooks, which allow you to set up from the experimental process through the selection of your materials, which again can be all indexed already in your database, then you set up each of your protocols and linked workflows, then you acquire the data again in a pre-formed template, and that then allows direct upload of your data in a format that's compatible with databases. So the NanoCommons, the next couple of slides are a little technical, but I'll do my best to sort of explain the components. And the two partners that have been particularly involved in the infrastructure side are Edelweiss Connect and Biomax Informatics. So the idea really then is that there'll be data providers from all sorts of places. So it can be literature, it can be running projects, it can be ended projects, it can be starting projects. And there's multiple ways to get the data in. So the electronic lab notebooks that I've mentioned, or batch upload of spreadsheets once they're annotated. And then there's a web interface also that I'll explain. And then the knowledge base piece comes in because it provides all sorts of warehousing, it provides the protocoling, it brings in data from different projects, and what it really does then is apply a set of harmonization approaches and activities to enhance the quality, so quality control and checking of both the automatic and manual curation, and then finally provides a set of access to the data. So again, through a web interface where you can just download data sets through APIs, so it can go straight into other programs or into other tools, and then various file exchange platforms and so on. So really it's, you know, providing the whole set of solutions to be able to then use and apply the data. So the way we do it, or the magic as we call it, is the bringing in of the data sets from all sorts of places and organizing them in a way that they're suitable for other researchers, so that they're for machine learning, for example, for modeling, for model validation, for regulators, and for data management. And the way that we do that is through this thing called a semantic model, which is basically just a schematic or a visualization of how the data is linked and what it's linked to. So in this particular one, it's sort of more medical data, but you get the idea that, you know, each protein is linked to a certain, is related to a disease or is found in association with. So this is really the ontology layer, and where each term has a specific meaning and a specific relationship with other terms. And once you have that for your data set, the database then knows where to put each unit of data. And the idea then with the knowledge base is that it's coupling the data then with applications. So organizing for the same material, it's particle characterization, it's corona data, it's molecular omics data, it's classical toxicology data, organizing it and annotating it with the ontology terms so that the database knows where to put it, and then allowing us to pull down that data or to apply our modeling tools on top of it. So all sorts of computational modeling, biomarker prediction, network analysis, etc. So sort of an integrated solution to knowledge management and nanoinformatics. Back then to the semantic model, this is the piece that does all the work. So it takes the original data sources, maps the semantic model, and then provides a user interface, so typically a graphical user interface, or the API, the application programming interface, to allow the data to be integrated. And the key piece of NanoCommons is that it's not duplicating data. So we're not taking in data that already exists in other databases. We are linking the data warehouses so that if you put it into one database, we can still communicate with that database and the data set can be used and reused. So the idea isn't to have the same data in 3 or 4 different databases, because that's energetically inefficient, and it's not, you know, there's no need to do that. So the idea would be that, you know, new project one might put their data directly into the NanoCommons warehouse, but another will put theirs into eNanoMapper, but then we will, through the APIs, be able to pull that data both ways. So from NanoCommons into eNanoMapper and from eNanoMapper into NanoCommons. And again, that's the semantic model is the bit that enables us to do that. So if we map the semantic model of NanoCommons to the semantic model of eNanoMapper, and then we know what we each mean by terms, they can be organized and communicating. So the interoperability layer is really this magic that allows us to have the data sets communicating. So this is what the NanoCommons knowledge base looks like. The link is there. We do just ask people to register. That's so just to give us your email address and contact details, and then you will be given a password. You can go in and play with it. And again, we have some data from older projects that's fully open. We have some that's in there that is currently under embargo, but as the papers are released, that will be, the data will also be released. And in the meantime, there is all the information there for how you can, who to contact to set up a materials data, an agreement to access the data. We also are increasingly adding then the in silico descriptors, the corona predictions, the groupings and alerts and so on. We've also got some literature mined data sets. Vladimir already mentioned the AOP activity from the OECD Nano AOP working group that has over 250 studies in it relating to over 300 different variants of particles, and we're just doing a final cleaning of that data set to make it available also. And then it's rapidly expanding via transnational access projects. So these are projects that apply to NanoCommons to get technical support to do the magic for their data sets, so to help them with the ontological annotation and to organizing their data sets for upload into NanoCommons. So the thing that makes it a knowledge base rather than just a data warehouse is some of the functionality. So the services that we can put on top of the data. So beyond just archiving the data. So in order to archive, as I said, we need the metadata, but then beyond that, we can add functionality such as browsing, searching, retrieving, and analyzing. And that's relatively straightforward things that you would expect from a database. But with the semantic integration, then we can harmonize and map different data sets. And again, the functionalities that we add here then include being able to navigate connections, being able to combine different types of data sets, and then being able to visualize the different data sets. And then a piece that I'm particularly excited about is this idea of enrichment. So we can enrich the data that we generate with other types of data, so with biological knowledge or with broader environmental data. And these are just some limited examples. So in terms of the biological knowledge, we can bring in existing knowledge about genomes, about pathways, about protein-protein interactions and protein small molecule interactions, transcription factor networks, etc. On the environmental side, we have a case study underway at the minute to start bringing in things like soil and water chemistry. So again, that you could start doing predictive modeling of how particles might behave in the environment. Things like co-pollutants, what else is out there, what other chemicals might they be interacting with. Things like species distributions and species sensitivity distributions, but also then long-range trends, and then that gives us the ability to sort of make future predictions as well. So the enrichment layer is a really useful aspect of what we can provide. And then there's just an example of it, so the things that I've already said. So, for example, in the transition between the NanoMile project and the NanoPhase project, for example, we were able to hand off all the characterization about the particles, all the existing materials data safety sheets. We had lots of tox and ecotox data and the omics data. So NanoPhase was then focused more on the fate and behavior, but because many of the materials were in common, we can then integrate the fate and behavior with the toxicology behavior to then move us towards risk assessment, for example. So that was sort of just the data and the enrichment of data. then we start to have some of the analysis and prediction tools as well. So just a couple of quick examples, and I won't go into any detail because of time, but also because I don't know the detail. Really, well, I don't know the exact details. So for example, differential expression analysis, so where you can make the volcano plots, for example, taking the RNA-seq data. So that can all be done in the knowledge base without having to exit it and move data into new tools. We've also, as Vladimir mentioned, already started integrating the corona models. So for different materials, each particle in the database has a specific particle ID, just a nanoparticle and then a number. They'll usually also have a project ID of where they came from, and then the protein ID, and then you start to get the heat map and so on. So again, you upload the data, do the analysis, and you get your prediction of your corona model. So again, pulling all of that information together and allowing you to do the visualization in the knowledge base. So the next steps then, so there's, as I said, these are just a few examples. We've recently been integrating a model for predicting molecular initiating events, for example, again, using a lot of the information generated within SmartNanoTox. So the next steps really then in terms of what we're doing next is, Vladimir already mentioned that there's a transnational access project underway for the experimental data. And then we're in the process of finalizing the details of a transnational access for the computational data and the models. And one of the key challenges that we run into is that a lot of the ontology terms needed for modeling are missing. So how we do that, how we work in parallel to annotate the data sets while also working to get the terms defined and into the ontologies. So what we've proposed to do is to take the wiki approach to define the terms, which Gracious has already been using. They've developed this method to allow people to come together, discuss a term, vote for the term, and then when they've got agreement, they will then that's the term, that's the ontology definition, which we will then pass over into NanoCommons to make it, to formalize it into the newest updates of, for example, the eNanoMapper ontology. But in parallel to that, we're working on an on-the-fly annotation approach. So as the terms are being agreed, we can already start to use them while they're being formalized so that we don't have to wait until the ontology term is agreed. We can work with the working definition of it, and then it just becomes finalized. We're also developing a tool then for the harmonization of the MODA template. So this is the templates used to describe, you know, the metadata about the models, essentially. And we've already done a version of that for protocolling, for example, in Ace Nano, for how you make your SOPs. So we're going to do the same approach for the MODA templates. And then finally, working on annotating the computational materials and getting them into the knowledge base so that then the data sets can track with them. So really, I think the message of what I wanted to say was that we're preserving the SmartNanoTox legacy through making the data fair and reusable. And that's it, I guess. Hopefully I have one last slide of acknowledgements. Yes, so just to say that as with all projects, it's the sum of the whole is greater than any of the individual parts.